Good morning. This is Holly, and I'm just going to do a practice chart reading. I have up the natal chart of Prince Edward, Duke of Windsor. He was born the 23rd of June, 1894. He passed away in the 1970s. So I'm looking at this chart because one, he's a public figure who's passed. I'm not an expert on his life, but he does have a lot of notable details, and he had some controversial things that happened in his lifetime. So he has a very interesting chart to look at. And as I'm a student of Hellenistic astrology, so as I practice, I often look at the charts of known figures who have very well documented biographies to kind of see how the natal chart and the transits and match up with the known biography of the individual. So here we have Prince Edward's natal chart. He was born on the 23rd of June, 1894 in Surrey in the United Kingdom. He was the son of King George V and his wife, Queen Mary. And what we can see here is that Prince Edward was an Aquarius rising. So he is with his rising sign there. So with the Hellenistic astrology, that you're really looking first at what that sign is on the first house. We can see also that his moon is in Pisces and his sun is in Cancer. But it's the rising sign that when you come into this incarnated life, that is the life that kind of is your point, what they call the point of steerage, who you are in this lifetime. And it orients his whole outlook on life. So he is Aquarius is known as being kind of the sign of the people. It is the very egalitarian. The cat just jumped on the keyboard and it's gone now. But this is my fourth time trying to do this, so we're just going to keep going. So what we see here is right here in the first house is that rising sign of Aquarius, and here is his moon in the second house, sun in the sixth house. So we're just going to kind of look at the planetary condition of the planets in his natal chart, and we're going to just kind of go counterclockwise through the houses. So there's no planets in the first house. His second house of self-values, resources, how he makes his money in the world, it's in Pisces. He has a moon there, and his moon is there. The moon is comfortable in Pisces. It's another water sign because the moon rules over here in the sixth house, the sign of Cancer. In his third house of Aries, he has the North Node and he has Mars. Now, Mars is the domicile ruler of Aries and is very comfortable there. The North Node there is that there's a lot of energetic thrust into this house. So we can expect that with the North Node in the third house that this is going to be a place of growth and being basically highlighted for this individual. This is the house of brothers, of siblings, of friends, of close acquaintances, people close to you that are not necessarily your parents, but your friends and neighbors. It's short distance travels. It's communication. It's also can be studies, basic studies, and but not like higher learning. That's the ninth house. Here in the fourth house, we have, which is the house of home, family, ancestry, the sign of Taurus, which is ruled by Venus. So he also has a domicile. Venus is the domicile lord, which is also very good. This suggests in the fourth house that he comes from a family and ancestry of great abundance. They may have country homes or homes in the country. There may be some artistic sensibility or loving art in that family life, because Taurus can be very sensual and art loving, or lots of beautiful blooming gardens. And I do know from my studies that he did have lots of gardens in his younger, all throughout his life, actually, and that he particularly liked to grow roses. And so he did love gardens. So that's one of those interesting little manifestations of his Venus in the fourth house. In his fifth house, he only has one of the traditional visible planets, which is Jupiter. And Jupiter is in detriment, and Gemini does not like to be in the kind of detailed orientedness of Gemini. However, it's one of what is considered by the ancients of the benefic planets. So there can most likely be some blessings in this person's romantic life. This can also be the house of children or creative projects. We know he didn't have any children with his wife, and so perhaps while he had lots of blessings in other ways, the constriction of Jupiter here did not go to produce children. The other he also has a lot of fortune in the fifth house. So this area of creativity is kind of his path of fortune. He has a lot of Eros there, so it's important to his romantic life. But it's also you can see he has Pluto. That's the symbol here, and Neptune. So that there may be some great transformation in his romantic life, or creative pursuits, or regarding children, although we know he has had no children. And Neptune can be very romantic, can be very like spiritual, but it can also be things that dissolve or fade away or illusionary. So there is perhaps some of that going on as well. Over here in the sixth house, he has the sun and he has Mercury co-present together. This is the sixth house of health, healing, the work you do for others, service to others. So with the sun, that's his kind of like consciousness energy. It's putting a lot of energy behind being of service to others, which is a kind of, could be a very good placement for a man who is born to be the Prince of Wales and to be King of England in the United Kingdom. And at that time, they had rulership over a great commonwealth of colonies and other countries. So, he did have a life of privilege, but was also expected to be of service to the people. And here's his Mercury, communication being part of that service, which you would expect. Communication, some traveling, studies, all part of being someone who's promoting the United Kingdom abroad and within the country and working for others. In my research, he did have an interest in, and as Prince of Wales, did a lot to try to bring awareness to the plight of kind of the common worker and different had housing situations for the people of low income status and working conditions. So he did do research into that. He did kind of hope that he could improve working conditions, and just the overall quality of life for people who are less fortunate than himself. You see here in the 7th house, this is the sign of Leo, which is Leo the lion. It's the kind of it's the sign of the lead. And often it's considered the zodiacal sign of the king, which is interesting because he is of the zodiacal sign opposite, which is Aquarius, which is more like the common man. And, he did try to, when he was Prince of Wales and traveling about, trying to make himself much more approachable than some of his ancestors when relating with the public. So he, his other side of him, and this is the 7th house, it's your other kind of your shadow side, is that kind of extravagant, opulent, king figure. And he actually has the asteroid king in the 7th house. It's kind of interesting. He doesn't have any of the traditional planets in the 8th house. This is the house of death, dying, the hidden, the occult. He does have his vertex there, which is a kind of a point of destiny, and a number of the more notable asteroids, Vesta, and Ceres, are conjunct. He has Chiron there, which is a wounded spot, the wounded healer, and we have here Pallas Athena. So even though there's none of the traditional planets there is quite a bit of energy in that with what they call the goddess asteroids and Chiron, making the 8th house of this can also be a house of transformation. That transformation is going to be something that comes up in his lifetime with this point of destiny and this woundedness here. The 9th house, which is like higher learning, belief systems, long distance travel. It's Libra, and he has Saturn there. Now, Saturn is the ruler of his first house, and it's in Libra where it's exalted. So he has a strong Saturn, and you can see that there's going to be who he is going to be very much influenced by this 9th house of belief systems. And Libra is the sign of equality, balance, harmonizing. And with Saturn there's a very big emphasis on fairness and diligence, and it has kind of like a little bit of a legal feeling to me. So you can see this by sign as a trine to his first house. These yellow signs are all air signs. Saturn can also be the planet representing the father. You can say that he has this father who's very visible up in the sky and very influential on him. Although he has put in his autobiographies that he was a bit afraid of his father. His father was a very regimented personality who could have fits of kind of explosive anger. And can see that there's by sign that what they call a trine, 120 degree aspect, and it also trines this important 5th house of children, creativity, recreation, artistic pursuits, creativity. If you move to the 10th house, this is your place in the world, your career. This is Scorpio, which is the fixed sign of water. No planets here, but you can see what is here is Juno, which is the goddess asteroid of marriage, partnership, equal relating, next to Uranus, which is a planet of sudden change, the unexpected, eccentricity, or something that's very unusual, the unusual. So you almost can read that as up here, his place in the world, who he is going to really be marked by an unusual partnership. The 11th house, which is like the the public, the greater community, Sagittarius, which is almost like it's a global community. And we have here the 12th house of Capricorn. So looking at this, I can see really he has a very, notable Mars and Venus. So a potential here to be, because with Mars and Aries, that he also could be quite hot-headed at times, impulsive, very active. And here it is in his third house that it could mean that he could at some point have be argumentative, because the third house is a lot about communication and siblings, that there could be some difficulty with his siblings. We have a name here, Simpson, which is his wife's last name, right in his natal chart, conjunct Mars. And it's almost reading that this person named Simpson is someone who's going to become between, because Mars can be cutting or severing things, come between him and his brothers. And we do know from his biography that he becomes king. He wants to marry Wallis Simpson to be his wife. That would make her queen of the United Kingdom. And the court did not really find her suitable. At that point, he's King Edward VIII, as the head of the king in England is the head of the Church of England as well, and the Archbishop of Canterbury and the church elders, clearly pointed out that this was not appropriate for the king, as the head of the Church of England, to marry someone who was twice divorced and had a little bit of a scandalous reputation. He kind of held firm. This was the woman he loved. He was king, so he should marry who he wanted. It created a bit of a constitutional crisis, they called it, in the United Kingdom, because he really wanted to marry this particular person, and who was seen by his, kind of his community, the court and the church, to be unsuitable for him. And he held firm to that. But his next younger brother, after he was required to abdicate, or he chose to abdicate the throne, George the Sixth became king, and made it very. The circumstances is that it was very difficult for Edward to go back to the United Kingdom to live after he abdicated the throne. So he ended up spending a lot of the rest of his life in France, in various other places, traveling. But it was kind of perceived that there could not be really two kings in the United Kingdom at one time. And the other thing was, although his brother granted him the title of Duke of Windsor after he got married, he did not attend his brother's wedding. None of his brothers did, or his family, and they would not grant Wallis Simpson a title that Edward thought she should have, which was the styling Her Royal Highness. So while he could be His Royal Highness, the Duke of Windsor, and had all his life been His Royal Highness, it would have, under normal circumstances, as his wife, she would have been granted and styled Her Royal Highness, but the new king would not allow that. And so that became a point of contention between Edward and his brother George. You can see here that with this place of growth, it's away from this sign of Libra, which is harmonizing. So there is something in his birth chart that is really pushing for him to speak up for himself, and that perhaps have this kind of contentious or perhaps argumentative relating as part of his life experience. One of the other asteroids I found was this one called Nessus. This is a centaur asteroid that has to do about abuse, and it's conjunct the moon. The moon in this chart is what's called the dominant luminary, and this is a night chart. So the sun and the moon are below the horizon line. But when that happens, it's the moon that is, the moon is the light of the night side of the night sky. So that makes the moon more important than the sun in this chart. And it's fueled because the moon has the sun in its home sign of Cancer as well as Mercury. So this gives added resources to the moon and how the moon relates. But it's kind of nuanced because this moon has Nessus, which is, he's a centaur that was abusive and tried to he was killed by Hercules after he attempted to rape Hercules' wife. So, and then created something, gave some poison to someone else and resulted in the poisoning of Hercules. And so Nessus has a reputation as an asteroid that is about kind of manipulation and sometimes even physical abuse. The moon can be the mother or any nurturing figure in a person's life. So with Nessus here, it's really kind of nuancing this important planet, is that there is something that has affected it in a somewhat abusive way or manipulative way. So with the moon being any nurturer, it could be his mother, who was in his biography kind of described as a kind of a distant or remote figure, because she was doing a lot of the representing work with her husband, King George V. So that they weren't home. It wasn't really a hands-on mothering situation. Like many other royal children, Edward had lots of nannies, and he later talks about how some of them were instructed to be extremely strict, almost borderline abusive, and in order to be raised in the very regimented, controlled, disciplined way that his father wanted him and his brothers to be raised in. So, but however, the moon is also your kind of your emotional intelligence, and so it is. You can see that there's something here that makes him feel a bit perhaps abused and by his by the people who nurture him in his life. But perhaps that is also affecting how, when he did do his public work and when he was a prince, why he was kind of drawn to see the underprivileged. He would go see people who were much less fortunate than himself. And for that reason, when he was Prince of Wales, he was enormously popular with the people, because he did go see people who are living in hardship and empathize with them. And did very much care about the common people of the United Kingdom. That later in his life, I mean, he has gotten controversial scrutiny because he did pursue he was interested in the Nazi Party and what they could do for the common people, and um, has been question marked as a Nazi sympathizer. And what did that mean? And so there are some, what it reads like some of the, um, he did go to Germany right before the war. He did meet Hitler. To the extent that he was involved in that, we don't, perhaps we'll never really know. He may have went there being invited because he was used to being a public figure. The depth of his interest was never really fully disclosed to the public, but it has always been a question mark, and it has made him a little bit more of a controversial figure. How deeply sympathetic he might have been there, if it was just purely because he thought that there may have been a form of government that could have helped the people, versus if he really had any anti-Jewish feelings. And I haven't researched the subject enough to know, but it is something that is part of his history for this particular person that also kind of leads to his controversial place in history. We can see here with that Pluto there, this is a lot of fortune, a lot of arrows here, that his romantic life is going to be very transformative and perhaps lead to some kind of a crisis that leads to change. I'm going to just put some transits in here. So if I hit that button with transits, so these are the transits for January 20th, 1936. This is the day that his father passed, and he becomes king of the United Kingdom as King Edward VIII. What we can see here is that here his sun, on that day, the sun is in the 12th house. It's rising, but this is a house of confinement, and I'm just kind of looking through it, and what we most notably see for me is that the day he becomes king, but down here in the 4th house, the unusual partnership is right there in that foundation of place. We have, like at the 10th house, we have Uranus conjunct Juno, the unusual partner or the unconventional partner, the outside of acceptability partner. And not far away is that asteroid Simpson in that 4th house of the home. So she is in the home. She is right there in the foundation. And we see this little key-shaped asteroid, which is Chiron. It's the wound in this house of romance, love, creativity, and it's conjunct that Pluto in the lot of Eros. And there is this pain with that transformation of the romantic life, that I think even at this point, he's realizing that his love for Wallace Simpson is going to be a difficult thing. If he's going to be king. And he's already at this point feeling the pain of the difficulty that the person he loves brings to his circle of friends and his social life, and to his family. And even because he is king at this point, to his bigger picture in the world. You can see another down here. Eris is it's the planet of breaking patterns. You see this really close to that that Mars and the North Node, and it kind of somewhat suggests that as king, he's going to be in this place of communication, breaking some patterns. we see here Pluto at this point is transiting Cancer, and it's applying to his natal Mercury, which Mercury can be siblings, it can be communication, it can be what you study, it can be details, it can be messages. But I think in this case, retrospectively, it's what has happened is one for going to transform how he relates to his brother, and also how he communicates with the public, because he's now shifted from being Prince of Wales to the king. But it's going to have also long-term consequences with how he relates to his brothers, and how he serves. He has Mercury in the first house, and so he's kind of in the Mercury can be kind of the young studier. So he's a new king. He's still learning the ropes. It's his very first day, and probably what's more on his mind is up here. You can see King. That asteroid is approaching his vertex. So it's one, this is in the 8th house. The 8th house is the house of death. This is the death of the king, as well as the transformation of the king. So he's the new king, and it's this point of destiny. He has, it's his destiny of him being the eldest son of the king. He's become the king. But with also, we see here's his natal Chiron in the 8th house, conjunct Neptune. So there is this kind of pain to this for him. Not only is it grieving for his father, but he talks that he struggles with his official duties at time, with the kind of roteness of ceremonial duty of being a king, with some of the traditions that he finds really antiquated, and he does his best for a while to do them, but he sees some things that happen as unnecessary, and he kind of can't help it but buck the system at times, and he gets criticism for that, for not doing his duties the way it is perceived that he should do them. And yet we see in here the 11th, which is his kind of global community, that the moon's there, which is the nurturing, and Jupiter's there, and Venus is there. So he has both the planets of blessings in the moon. And this kind of shows how well the public loved him at the time, because he had been kind of a prince of the people, going out and trying to advocate for them. So although he has difficulties, down here in the 2nd house, which is like the job that you do, which is in kind of like working with what has been called the firm, which is the royal family. He has difficulties there. The people out here in the 11th house, they love him. He's a very popular prince. He's the public thinks he's going to be a really great king because he's been such a great Prince of Wales. But you can see that down here with this conjunction of Mars and Saturn in this house, 2nd house of who you are, what you do, that there's difficulties right from the start. When you look at planetary condition in his natal chart, with this being a night house, his planet of greatest benefit is Venus, and which is the 4th house. So he has this like blessings of being kind of this abundant gardener, artistic personality in the home, this wonderful home life, and his most challenging planet is what they call the out of sect malefic, which is with the planet split into the two teams, the night team and the day team. He's a night chart, so the opposite is the day team, and the malefic of the day team is Saturn. So he has a more benevolent Saturn because it's in the day part of the chart, which it prefers, and it's in a sign it prefers. It's exalted in Libra. But it does suggest that his greatest challenges are going to come from things that are Saturnine. And, Saturn is his ruler, and this is a lifetime where his ruler is the great teacher, the great tester, the great planet of like mental discipline and, long-term challenges and how you kind of do things and represent, and can you live a life of discipline and, of self-responsibility. And you see this down here, and it's conjunct Mars, which is the other difficult planet, but he is also more on his side, that these two challenges are both being brought into what he does and how he makes his money, and that is by being the king, by being a representative of the British people. And it is both a physical and mental challenge for him for various reasons. So we can see that right there from the beginning, that role of being the king is going to be difficult. And again, it's these difficulties are right kind of opposite, parallel. The asteroid king here, and it's connecting here with his natal moon, his kind of sensitive and yet it's feeling somewhat abused and emotional state. So anyway, those are just some notes on the chart of Edward, Duke of Windsor. Again, like I said, I'm not an expert on him, but this has just been a kind of a practice chart reading, and there's more to look at this chart. We can go further in time and look at other transits. We can look at his zodiacal releasing and stuff like that. But I've been chatting on a little bit. Hope you found this interesting. If you did, leave a comment. Have a great day.